Thank you everyone for coming today. So today is all about fibroids at work. So I'll explain a little bit about what fibroids is, the common symptoms, and then we'll go into discussing best practice at work, what employers can be doing for staff members who have fibroids. And we also will have a workplace testimonial. Henrietta will be joining us today as well to share her experience of having fibroids and her career and how it's impacted her. Before I go on any longer, I just wanted to let you know that today I am here, representing Endometriosis UK. I am the Workplace Menstrual Wellbeing Program Manager. So I'm currently running a project about 6 different conditions, obviously fibroids being one of them, and I'm just kind of supporting and guiding and sharing as much information I possibly can to help employers support their staff. So I won't be here today to be able to diagnose anyone with fibroids or help in terms of like the medical aspect. But if you do have any questions, do use the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screens. And if there are any medically related questions, I will park them to the side and I will try and get our specialist nurse who works at Endometriosis UK to try and answer them. And then I can always circulate them back round to the attendees that attended today. So fibroids at work. So what is fibroids? So fibroids are the most common gynecological condition. Endometriosis is followed in second place. Fibroids are non-cancerous growths and are found in or around the womb. The exact cause of fibroids is not fully understood, but we do think there's a link to estrogen. Fibroids are more common from puberty up until menopause, as this is when estrogen levels are high. And there are different types of fibroids, and the names depend on where they are within the womb. So on the right-hand side, you'll see an image. So you can see that there's the intramural fibroid, and this grows inside the muscle layer within the wall of the womb. You then have the subserosal fibroids. This grows on the outside wall of the womb and into the pelvis. You then have these submucosal fibroids, and they grow on the inner wall of the womb and into the cavity of the womb. And finally, you have the pedunculated fibroids, and these are when the subserosal fibroids and the submucosal fibroids grow on a stalk. As you can see, it's kind of just hanging off there on the side. So common symptoms. Common symptoms of fibroids will include heavy periods, prolonged periods, so bleeding that lasts a long time, painful periods, swelling and firmness in your tummy, pain or pressure in your pelvis or your lower back, pain with sex, constipation, needing to pee more often, and difficulty getting pregnant. Some people may be unaware that they even have fibroids, and some people may not have any symptoms at all and still have fibroids. So it's very important that if you are here today as a manager or someone from the HR team, that it's really important to take away that each individual is very different. So the symptoms they have will be different, but also how, fibroids impacts them will be very different. So it's kind of like a case by case situation. So it's not going to be like one kind of practice suits all. It will be where you need to really sit down with an individual who's expressing, who might come to you and be like, I have fibroids and this is what I need help with at work. It'll be very different for every individual. So that support that you do give each individual at work would be very different and will be tailored as well. So I just wanted you guys to keep that in mind. Diagnosis. So in terms of a diagnosis for fibroids, you will have a blood test to check if an individual has anemia. You will then also have an ultrasound scan, a hysteroscopy, and also potentially an MRI scan as well. The first thing, obviously, an individual will do was go to a GP, and the GP may suggest you have some pelvic exams. And then depending on what the results show, they may refer you to a gynecologist as well. Your gynecologist then will decide, obviously through having conversations with an individual, whether there's any further tests that may be included. And as I mentioned, these are the further tests that could happen as well. So again, if you're here as an employer, really important to understand a diagnosis of fibroids, because they are quite lengthy in time to be diagnosed. There is a lot of going back and forth from the GP to the hospitals, etc. There might be multiple different appointments, and I will get into catering for an individual's appointments later on in the webinar as well. So yeah, just being really mindful of the diagnosis process is quite key, and to be able to support an individual through it is really important. So treatment, there are several treatments for fibroids, and again, every individual will be different. The treatment that's best for an individual will depend on the individual's symptoms and how much it impacts their life, and also if the individual would like to have children in the future. So, individual may have maybe given medicines, and these medicines may include painkillers, medication to reduce heavy menstrual bleeding, or potentially also to shrink fibroids. Or they might have surgery, so to remove the fibroids, a hysterectomy. They might have a transcervical resection, an endometrial ablation, or a UAE as well would be offered. Again, these conversations are, the ones that you have with your gynecologists, and they're important conversations that you obviously get to make a decision in regards to what treatment you have. And as an employer, and obviously I will try and relate everything back to work as much as possible, when an individual is going through a treatment, again, very different. Each individual will be very different in regards to the treatment options they pick. So it'd be really good to understand, how could you help them if they are going through, for example, a surgery? What can you put in place as an employer? Ask them about the support they need, or the time off they might require. It's really important to have these open and honest conversations throughout the whole kind of process of understanding, from understanding what fibroids is right to the treatment and individuals having. So in a nutshell, that's kind of what fibroids are. I am going to now introduce Henrietta. She's joining us today, and she'll be sharing her workplace testimonial. So she'll be going through her journey with fibroids, how it's kind of impacted her career, and kind of what the positive outcomes of the right support, or what does the right support look like in terms of someone who has fibroids. And Henrietta, the floor is yours. So I'll just mute myself.
Hi everyone. My name is Henrietta. Thank you so much for joining today. This is a subject I'm very passionate about. So I am a fibroid warrior. I tend to say warrior as in WARRIOR, instead of sufferer, because although it can be really debilitating and excruciating at times, you gain so much resilience from the journey. So that's something I'm really passionate about sharing today, and just mentioning ways that employers can really help their employees as well. So thank you for mentioning everything you just have. It definitely is a case by case situation. Everyone is different. There are people who are asymptomatic, and there are people like myself who show symptoms but don't know what they are, because a lot of the pain that I've been through has been normalized. So I think it's really fascinating looking back on my journey, and in particular my work path, my career vocation style, because way before I even knew what fibroids were, I knew I was anemic, which is a really big telltale sign of someone who has fibroids. And my menstrual cycle was so debilitating that I knew from probably 19 years old that I would need to learn how to navigate my life around it. So I very early on put aside all my hopes of being a presenter. I looked into being like a journalist too, and I thought, okay, I need to think of something that's going to work where I can work remote. So this is pre-pandemic, pre-pandemic, when everyone was working from home. I was already trying to establish a portfolio for myself, looking at everything and anything, location scouting, photographers for weddings. Like I just knew that I had to build a freelance career for myself, because on paper, the symptoms I was suffering just did not look good to an employer. In my opinion, I was very scared to go into the workplace, knowing that at that point in time, my cycle was so debilitating. I would spend a week suffering in bed with symptoms which are related to anemia, but I didn't know at the time they're also very much related to having fibroids. I would have dizziness, lightheadedness, headaches, fevers, really cold. There are quite a few symptoms. It's a very long list. And as I got older, it got worse and it progressed. So I would end up like throwing up. My hearing and eyesight was getting worse. I noticed I was struggling to carry heavy things. I had shortness of breath. You might be able to tell on the call today. My breath is a little bit shallow. This is just one of the symptoms of being severely anemic. So I've been told I was anemic since I was like about 13 years old. I was vegetarian, and they put it down to that. They never really investigated. So I've just spent my entire life thinking, oh, because I'm anemic, I have to work around it, and that involves jigging my work style life around that too. So my story is in two parts. It's heavily based around being anemic and also finding out that I had fibroids. So, along with all the extremely heavy blood loss, I noticed that closer to the pandemic time, I started realizing that I would have to run to the ladies every 3 seconds. That's what it felt like. And I ignored it. I kind of just learned to cope with that. And I was like, oh, that's weird. Maybe I'm just getting older, up in age. So um, that was one of the symptoms I realized, which was related to fibroids. But again, at that time, I had no idea what fibroids were. And this was also around the time of lockdown where everyone was doing their at-home workouts. And I noticed I had a protruding stomach. And my abs used to be my thing. Like I had no problems with my core when it came to working out. So I just thought, okay, this is clearly something, maybe an appendicitis thing. And I do need to get it looked at. But it was also the time where hospitals were only letting one person in at a time. I do want to mention just before this, I did actually enter a workplace. It was a small office, or it was a big office, but a small department, and I was working alongside two men. And surprisingly, they helped me so much with my anemia, just giving tips and advice. It was a very nice open space. They would talk about their gluten intolerances, and I was like, maybe I should look into that because that affects iron levels too. And it was nice to be in that environment. But I did sadly get let go due to the pandemic. So I moved on from that role, and now we're back into the home workouts. Okay, so back into the home workouts now, and it gets to the point where I'm realizing that even on my daily walks, I'm struggling um to go and pick up a bottle of like 5 liter water bottle, and I was fainting a lot. And in the back of my mind, throughout the years, it's always concerned me because I do want to work a 9 to 5, and I feel like my health has always been in the way of that. So it's always been sad to me that this has always gotten in the way. But I just thought that's how things are. So I kind of learned to make adjustments. And I think that a lot of women do tend to suffer in silence. Um, and the floor is rarely open for us to just be open without judgment. So during 2021, I realized my symptoms were getting so much worse, that I decided to go into A&E for um a blood transfusion. No, actually it was an iron infusion because I didn't know about blood transfusions then either. And they kept me in for 4 days. And at the time I was like, I just need like an iron like dosage. And they decided to investigate, and I'll be forever grateful for that because they got to the bottom of it, and they felt that protruding stomach I mentioned earlier, and they told me it looks like you might have fibroids. So relieved to know what it was, but also very scared at the time. I did a lot of Googling and researching, um, and found out that there was treatment. So that was 2021. And in the last 2 to 3 years, I have had two procedures. So I've had the first one I had was a UAE, which is the embolization, which goes into the artery and blasts it like fireworks almost and cuts the supply off. So in turn, that basically shrinks the fibroids. Um, this was done whilst I was in my new role. Okay, so this was last year, 2023. And I had a bit of a rocky recovery, accidentally overdosed. And how this affected me at work, I would say, is that I was told I could go back to work within 2 weeks. And I was in bed for 6 months. So I was also let go from this role. Um, and in a way, I was kind of grateful because I thought there was no way they would have let me take in 6 months off. And in this particular workplace, it's a very interesting environment, not only because it was toxic, but because um, I did feel like I was discriminated against. I had a line manager who opened up about her women health issues. She mentioned she had endometriosis very casually. So I also mentioned I had, women's health issues and said I had fibroids. And she was like, oh, okay. And that soon led to her kind of judging me. So judging and sabotaging me. So I feel as though with someone who has a women's health condition, you are already feeling alienated. And I think it's really important in the workplace to create awareness for these issues, but not to make someone, like, not to give too much attention to it because it will make the condition worse. Because one of the leading factors and contributions to fibroid growth is stress. And stress, I promise you, like, is the worst thing for fibroids. They grow very fast due to stress. So, yes, it's great to have awareness, but attention can cause that stress and it can really alienate an employee. So, that's my experience with that workplace. I was made to go to HR too. This was all not my choice and just declare hospital letters, and it just made a bigger deal than it needed to be. Because I do believe these are private issues, and it's important to share with your employer. But it's up to you how much you would like to share. So I think it's down to just being mindful and kind. I think that's the best place. I mean, the best way to navigate within these situations. Um, this workplace made me disguise the fact that I had this condition for the longest time because I came in fully aware that I had this condition at this point. I had my medicine to reduce the blood loss. I had my medicine to deal with the pain. And I was very proud of myself that I had like gotten to a point where, okay, I'm in a 9 to 5, I can do this, is absolutely fine. Um, and I realized that I was actually using days where I was on my menstrual cycle as holidays. So I would take my annual leave, not wanting to tell anyone that this day I will literally be unable to even stand up. Um, it is debilitating at times, but it really is depending on the person. I definitely am very strong. There are a lot of women out there who are stronger than you'll ever understand. They're so brave. I actually found just before I entered this role through my friend Dawn Hills. She runs a support group called the Guidance Suite, and they are an incredible bunch of women, so strong and so brave. And the stories you hear will literally knock you off your feet. And I've just learned so much about advocating and empowerment from these wonderful ladies. And I'm just so so happy to be a member because they are truly amazing. It's amazing when you have a lived experience and you can share that with another woman. It really does create a really good sisterhood. And I think that'll be really nice translated into the workplace too. A true understanding of the condition, um, and just a soft, gentle approach, I think, is the best in those situations. So that's basically the bulk of my story. I've also had a second procedure. I have had a hysteroscopy. It's the resection of a fibroid where they physically go in and chisel away at the fibroid. I went in March, I believe, and they told me they were going in for one and they came out with four. So you really never know how these things are going to go. So that's great news for me. But again, it still plays in my mind. If I was working, would I be allowed to take that time off? So it was all about flexibility and leniency. And I've just got a couple of notes I've written down here. Um, I do think there are some positives to take away from this. So I have learned a couple of lessons, how much I am willing to share and what the right ropes are. Within the support group, we always talk about buzzwords with consultants. And I think it would be amazing to have that in the workplace too. Just a language that everyone understands. Um, I think that would be really great actually, because then it kind of builds that bridge and takes down those barriers. I've learned to trust my gut, which is a really good thing. And just seek the good in companies because I know not all companies are toxic. I've learned to advocate for myself and empower myself, and I've learned to prioritize self-care and stay stress-free. Um, and I feel that when there are procedures in place, and for the most part, this is very much curable. It would be nice as an employee to be treated equally, I think, because it's not something we choose. But I have taken a lot of positives away from my experiences. If you guys have any questions, I would love to answer them for you. I'm sure there are some things that I may have missed out, so I might jump in with the questions and address them if they come up. But thank you so much for listening.
Thank you so much, Henrietta. Going on from Henrietta's workplace testimonial, we are now going to go into talking about fibroids in the workplace and supporting your colleagues and what that looks like. So work together to achieve a positive outcome. So I've split this up into two different sections. So first we ask employees to consider. So we can ask employees to consider sharing information about fibroids, the treatment, and explain what you are experiencing and how this affects you. So as Henrietta mentioned, you don't have to, share everything. You share what you're comfortable sharing, but share enough information to start those conversations happening within the workplace, and that's a good starting point. Seek advice and support, whether that be with your HR team, the NHS website, Endometriosis UK's website. We do have a huge range of publications and resources that we have on our website, but also other organisations and other charities. I know Henrietta mentioned Dawn Heals, and I will pick up on that later in the Q&A, Henrietta, as well. But there are so many support networks and support groups out there, so really utilise them, and they can really, support you through your journey at work as well. And, I think the key thing to take is learn from each other. And I think that's a really good way of learning around, from hearing other people's stories, what's worked for them, what have they tried doing. It's quite powerful in that sense. Don't assume or expect an employer to make a reasonable adjustment automatically. It can take time. So be open-minded about your working arrangements. But if you do have working arrangements that are put in place and they are no longer working for you, do let your employer know. It's really important that you don't feel that you're just stuck in that way because you've asked for the first time to have a workplace adjustment or a reasonable adjustment. Again, with these menstrual health conditions, things change. They don't stay the same every month or, throughout the year. Things might fluctuate. So really be confident in yourself to be able to speak out and advocate for yourself in the workplace, and just raise to your manager or to HR or your colleague or your staff member, this isn't working and this is kind of what I want to do going forward, and continue having those open and honest conversations. Try and understand the challenges also from your employer's perspective. So although, you're putting down that, you need a reasonable adjustment, etc., just keep in mind, obviously, the business as a whole. And that might mean that, some adjustments can't happen, but through conversations, I do hope that the support is still there. It might just be, certain, for example, working from home. I know some companies, if you're frontline delivering, it's really hard for you to be able to do a role that's quite active and it's frontline to be doing from home. But can there be other conversations around if it's a frontline delivery work? Is there a rota in place? Can you amend the rota if you're going to have, more pain in one week than another week? Again, having those honest and open conversations is so key with your employer. And as employers, we would like you to consider a few things as well. First and foremost, knowledge is power. So don't stop learning. Continue to, do your own research. Continue to ask questions. And just really, really kind of enhance the kind of knowledge hub that you have within your organization, but also within yourself. And that goes a very long way. How can organizations implement best practice? And are there things already in place? And if they are already in place, do your staff know about them? If they don't know about them, that is something that you could start, and that's a really good starting point to start cascading all that, all the stuff that you do have in place to support your staff member with a menstrual health condition, for them to know about it. What areas can you improve? So from the, previous bullet point, it can kind of funnel down to improvement areas. And also, what are the challenges? So once you identify the challenges, you can kind of mitigate against them, and then you can build back up in regards to supporting your employees as well. So I'm going to move on to best practice and suggestions. I've split this up into 3 different sections. So first and foremost, we have policies and support. What does that look like? We'll then talk about awareness, and then we'll talk about practical considerations linked to fibroids. So, policies and support. Are your policies and procedures supportive of those with fibroids? Check your existing policies to ensure those with fibroids or potentially cyclical symptoms are not disadvantaged, so other menstrual health conditions. And one really good example for this is if an individual does need to take a day off because they're not feeling well, because they having a flare up, or their fibroids are impacting them to be able to not log on and sign in, what is the reason that in your system, in your portal, that you put it down for? Is it is it put under other condition, or do you even have that option? Or could you think about supporting those with menstrual health conditions? And this is such a small thing, and having an option saying menstrual health leave or menstrual health sick, you feel more heard, you feel more seen, rather than putting down, I don't know, diarrhea or constipation or a headache, when it's not very telling of it actually being the condition that it is. Very small minor adjustment, but it would really make an individual feel quite like empowered at work to continue talking about their menstrual health conditions at work. Secondly, facilitate conversations about individual needs and see what flexibility can be applied to help them thrive in their work. As Henrietta mentioned earlier, we didn't ask for this. We don't ask to have these conditions, and it's not that we're not competent enough. Your staff members are very competent. They're in their role because they are the expert in that role and they know they can thrive in that role. They just need the support and the flexibility at certain times in the month or the year to enable them to continue doing what they have signed up to do. So being able to have those conversations and be able to support them will allow them to thrive, but also it will impact your business needs as well. So if they're thriving, so is your business. So it plays very good and very well hand in hand. Encourage staff members to feel they have a safe space and colleagues who understand their experiences. Appropriate training for line managers to create a supportive environment. And this training might include training in menstrual health. But what about training in, having confidence in having conversations about menstrual health? There's so many different training opportunities around confidence building, having conversations around tricky areas. What other training needs can you support your managers with to be able to have these conversations and for them to be able to create a supportive environment as well? Chronic pain conditions means managing symptoms. So is there an understanding around chronic pain in your workplace? What does that look like? Health and wellbeing initiatives. Are your health and wellbeing initiatives supportive of those with menstrual health conditions? If not, what can you be doing to be able to support those with those conditions? Occupational therapists and HR guidance. Do you offer it? If not, is this something that you can be offering? And what does your HR guidance look like currently? Start exploring, where are the gaps and where are the needs to be able to support individuals in the workplace. Also acknowledge that some staff might be suffering without being diagnosed or may not even be aware they have an illness. So be supportive. A diagnosis can take a while. I'm going to use endometriosis actually as an example. A diagnosis for endometriosis, an average is now between 8 to 9 years. So again, an individual is having these, symptoms a day in, day out of their work life, but they haven't even been diagnosed yet. So be really supportive in that stance as well. And finally, be kind and compassionate. That goes a long way. Up next, I want to talk about awareness. So raise awareness of fibroids at work to help staff feel supported. Do all managers know what fibroids is, and how this condition impacts their staff? It can be incredibly supportive and empowering and a real relief for an employee to say to the line manager or the supervisor, I have fibroids. And for an individual to hear back, I know what that is. Let's have a conversation about how it impacts you and how we can support you. So going back to knowledge is power, it can be very, very empowering and very helpful for an individual to come to a manager, and for a manager obviously to respond in the way I've just kind of laid out, because for an individual it can be very, very draining, but also it's very vulnerable as well, to share the condition that they have. It's quite personal, so taking that first step to even share that is a very big thing for an individual. But to be able to have a very supportive and an empowering conversation from the very beginning and from the get-go can be very very important in terms of the journey they then have with having a menstrual health condition in the workplace. So continue to be supportive and continue to keep learning about conditions as well. More menstrual health information within the organization, and this can be, up in bathrooms, maybe a bulletin board. If you have an online kind of e-portal, is there stuff on there that can be helpful with information for individuals as well? Menstrual health groups, so advocate for women's health at work. Think about, creating, maybe groups that could be breakaways from the organization and from the workplace. I know there's an organization that I've worked with, and they've had like a female empowerment group where they all come together, they talk about the conditions, but they feel heard, they feel like, there is somewhere at work that they can talk about how they're feeling. And from the back of that, they can go and cascade that learning throughout, their team, to their managers, etc. So again, the more we talk about menstrual health at work, I think the more others would feel more comfortable talking about it as well. Collaborate with menstrual health experts and organizations, and that means, charities that are experts in the field. Endometriosis actually do lunch and learns, and I know a lot of other charities in this field also do the same. So just kind of reach out to them, and they could host a lunch and learn or a bespoke talk to come, and they can come to your organization and give a conversation and give a talk on the topic at hand, but make it very bespoke to your organization in specific. And take action in the workplace. Take part in fundraising challenges, join employer schemes to show commitment to supporting creative workplaces. And just to highlight, I know obviously we're in September, but looking forward, July is Fibroids Awareness Month. So you could potentially do something in July to highlight that there is awareness, that these staff with fibroids are heard, and you are doing something for them. And practical adjustments. So if there is anyone here today who kind of fits a more practical role, these are kind of the small things that you could start thinking about doing. So little things, and this is kind of office space as well, easy access to toilets. I've had someone that I've spoken to where the individual didn't have a kind of private access to toilet because it was in an open office, and unfortunately she had to go and use another organization's office which was a bit more privatized, because she had to keep going to the toilet so often because of her condition. So she felt like everyone kept looking at her, etc. So easy access to toilets, but also private spaces if you're needing to go to the toilet a lot more often, but also if you're experiencing pain as well. What does that look like? Do you offer that as an employer? If you are an employer who needs or requires a uniform, consider having different options. Consider having different sizing, as those with fibroids may experience bloating, but also darker colors for those who experience heavy menstrual bleeding. Making those changes, again, very supportive of someone, for an individual with fibroids, and they feel more comfortable at work as well. Consider flexibility around working hours. This will benefit those with fibroids and enable them to thrive at work. And this could be, working hours within that week or of their, menstrual cycle. It could be options around working from home. So again, having those conversations at work and being kind of forthcoming, and being supportive of having those conversations and kind of showcasing that you do have flexible working policies. These things are in place if a staff member does require it. Just be open-minded about that. And finally, reassigning work or duties. I know this might not be the case for many employers, but if you have a team and there is an individual who, the team are well aware that there might be a week or a few days that they might need to kind of support that individual, and that might be just taking a few things off their to-do list, or, lightening that week in terms of how many meetings there are or they're having to go to. Just small adjustments like that would really go a long way as well to really help support someone with fibroids at work. So just wanted to share this kind of scale with you as well, and what that looks like. So if you've got at the top someone, with repeated absences, poor staff retention, performance, levels are dipping, they're feeling quite isolated at work. But if you kind of counteract that with a culture of openness, you have adjustments and adaptations at work, you have a supportive line manager, and there are resources, and you are signposting these individuals to the right places, it can really balance out that scale scale, so it can really balance out your business needs and also your staff and individual needs. And there is, obviously, it can work, and this kind of shows in a kind of an easy visual representation that it can work. If you're both having those open and honest conversations and things are being put in place to support those with menstrual health conditions such as fibroids at work. And finally, before I open the floor to a Q&A, I wanted to show you, if you are here today as someone who is supporting someone with fibroids, or if you are here today who, as an individual who has fibroids, who do you need in your support team? And if you are, supporting someone with fibroids, what does that look like? So you would be, or you would need someone who celebrates your wins, no matter how big or small, but also showing up during the hard times. Someone who takes things off your plate, as I mentioned earlier, taking a few things in terms of reassigning work duties, etc. And it will make those hard days a lot easier. And sometimes it's so nice without being asked to have things taken off your plate as well. Someone who makes you feel seen, validated, and makes you feel normal as well. Someone who tries to learn and understand through asking and listening instead of making assumptions. Someone who asks how they can help and understand that individuals with fibroids have different experiences. Someone who checks in from time to time, often struggle, someone with fibroids obviously often struggle with maintaining energy levels and attending social gatherings, but also think about work commitments in this essence as well. And someone who does not judge you. Fibroids is complex, and it's challenging for individuals to predict when they'll experience a flare up or pain or energy fluctuations. So again, being open, having that culture of openness is really important to support your staff at work. Henrietta, once again, thank you so much for coming. I'll drop you an email
You're
after.
most welcome.
But I hope everyone has a
Thank
lovely afternoon, and I'll speak to you guys all soon. Thank you.